can't just play like lightning bolts and stuff like that, because then you would be cascading into something else than Rhino. So there's not a whole lot of space for
Innovation, right?
innovation. Yeah.
Yeah, some people play, for example, some number of Disputes main deck,
Right.
Subtleties main deck, Flame of Honor, Tishana. So these are the main flex slots. So you can work with these numbers.
Something you can do in the meantime, both players, resolving their shardless agents, putting some 4/4s onto the battlefield. Looks like Daniel is actually able to use Force of Negation to deal with the Rhino. So he's going to be the one with a better board right now and the one to attack first. But something you can do is perhaps add white into your deck and play Teferi, because now, Cascade decks, there's a lot of living in, there is a lot of Rhinos. Teferi, that stops the Cascade card from being able to be played. So Teferi might be a good idea to add into your deck. Obviously, it's a 4th color, but also you can play Leyline Binding, which is a nice, nice way to deal with something like Chalice of the Void, for example. So I would be very tempted at possibly building my Rhinos deck 4-color for the future events to be able to use Teferi.
There have also been blue-white control deck that main deck Chalice. So maybe this could make a comeback, right? Because you play on Rhinos with all the Supreme Verdicts and Force of Negation. You could play Chalice main deck. So that could be one way to attack the metagame at large.
So the Shardless Agents trade-off, 8 damage coming through. Paulo finds himself at 12 and passes the turn. Obviously, we know that doesn't mean anything. You can just cast Violent Outburst at instant speed.
Oh, but now 2 more Rhinos are... Yeah, they are indeed added to the pack. So there is Violent Outburst, but it will just trade half of the board. There is still the other half. And Petty Theft at the ready. There's also Tishana, and Tishana can counter Cascade Trigger, which basically means that they cannot...
Oh, is it trigger?
Yeah. We've got Violent Outburst. Please wait, my opponent. Tishana. And we scoop them up. This play was game winning here. And this is like, we've been talking about this. Tishana, card of the weekend, card of the set. She has so many applications in Modern. Like so many. Counter EE activation, counter Chalice trigger, counter Cascade trigger, counter Ray Fetch, turn off Shieldred, turn off Planeswalkers. The list just goes on and on. What can she do?
Yeah, and it's been very good, and we saw it in Merfolk, we saw it in the Blue-Red Wizards deck.
Yeah.
That Elliot played, for example. Pretty cool card.
Pretty cool card indeed. And yeah, we see some sideboard shit prepared. I assume the mirror is up there, although I can see like a million matchups there. So yeah, homework has been done.
That's just Modern in a nutshell. Yeah, there is 40 different decks you have to prepare for. So, I mean, it's a good idea to do that. It's something that the top players do just as well as the casual players. You can write notes. You can look at your notes between games. So why not do that?
Yep. Precisely. And so they're double checking what they could sideboard in. And
so what are the cards you typically board in a matchup like this? Obviously, you're not going to board Chalice because that's going to stop you as well. So in a Rhino's Mirror, what are the best cards you can typically bring in?
So I can see one of the players has got Commandeer in the sideboard, which can allow you to essentially both counter the opposing Rhinos and then get them for yourself, which could be absolutely backbreaking, but then it incentivizes you to have mystical disputes to fight over that key interaction, right? If your Commandeer gets disputed, woof, that's a very negative exchange.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting card. Do you think, for example, boarding in Blood Moon could surprise your opponent?
That would be cheeky. That would be super cheeky.
It's a card that you can't really pitch to like a Force of Negation. Like, it's not really going to do anything else if it doesn't really have a powerful effect in play. So if your opponent already found a forest and an island, you having a Blood Moon is not really going to do anything. There's no, Fateless lootings, nothing to loot it away for something else. So is a Blood Moon something you would consider bringing in?
I think I could if I'm feeling frisky, because like, what's the alternative, right? If you're keeping Dead Gone in your deck anyways, you might as well maybe try to go with this cheese approach.
I think that one sounds reasonable though, because at least you can bounce a Rhino token and just make it disappear,
You
which
could,
is
yeah.
half of your opponent's um,
Clock, yeah.
Cascade card. So it's not a counter spell, but it effectively counters
Half, yeah.
50% of the card.
So
So Dead Gone seems pretty reasonable to me. Commandeer, obviously, I like that because that can just completely swing the game in your favor right on the spot. Blood Moon, for me, I think maybe on the play, like I can imagine just like bringing in one, just like, hey, maybe it's going to win me the game. But I would rather stick to just having counter spells and as many Cascade cards and ways to find them, or cards to cycle and dig deeper into my deck rather than something like Blood Moon.
There is another consideration, which is endurance, and that's mainly to be able to have access to more than 4 Rhinos, because you can shuffle them back into the deck. So essentially, you can actually outgrind the opponent with the raw number of Rhinos you put into play over a longer game, supposing that game even goes long.
Yeah, I think the cards you typically want to bring in are like the Brazen Borrower, so you can use Petty Theft to bounce a token, have a flying threat that can fly over the 4/4 ground creatures, and something along those lines. Obviously, as many counters as you can find in the sideboard.
I'm really surprised that Paulo lost this game because he had the Cavern in play, right? So even this advantage wasn't able to swing the direction. I'm really curious if I had 3 lands, would I keep 3 lands for Cascaders and just go bam, bam,
Yeah,
bam,
that sounds
bam.
great. That sounds like the best possible hand to have. And I think Cavern is actually not that relevant in this matchup because it's not a matchup where being the first one to get to 3 mana is going to help you, resolve a card like the Fairy. That's going to completely stop your opponent's deck from working. You just get the 4/4s into play first. But if your opponent does the same thing, well, then you attack and they trade. So I'm not actually even sure if Cavern is all that interesting to have at the start of the game. I would much rather have access to as many Cascade cards as possible, cards like Force of Negation, or Mystica Dispute.
And I did see Endurance, but it was put to the bottom. I can see Subtlety still in the deck, but Subtlety might be a counter for opposing Tishana as a counter.
Threat.
Yeah.
All right, looks like Paulo mulligan to 6. Daniel kept his hand. Turn 1 Rhino. So that's a pretty slow card. There are matchups where, turn 1 suspending Rhinos for 4, that would certainly not get you very far. But playing mid-range mirrors or playing against Ragda Scam, like those types of decks, that's where this is a perfectly reasonable play. Here, it's going to be the same thing. The Rhinos are going to be trading, so having one in the suspend zone ready for the future is certainly not a bad thing.
Yeah. As we just discussed, you just want the raw number of these Rhinos, just as many as you humanly can, and try to overload the opponent. Daniel with just a tapland, but we've got Fetch Shock, so okay, we will be icing on upkeep. On turn 1, so that's disallowing Daniel's ice on his turn to Paulo's turn 3, so that allows his Rhinos to resolve. So
I don't think there's a great way though for anyone to get in like an extra attack with their Rhinos before their opponent can do that, because now if Paulo just taps 3, plays a Shardless Agent, Daniel can do the same thing. So the cards that are the most important are the Force of Negations, or Mystica Dispute, something along those lines, but mostly just the Force.
Oh, but we're missing a land drop, so the best we can do is Lorien Revealed for a land. But that's a tap land, essentially, right? So we cannot hold up Fawn, Dispute, or Violent Outburst here.
Yeah, that has to feel good for Daniel. Now your opponent's not going to be resolving a Cascade card. If they want to cast Force of Negation, they have to pitch a card. They still can't tap 3 mana. So if you have your own Cascade card, you are in a good position. I think there is also a Brazen Borrower in Daniel's hand. There's a Force of Negation.
Daniel's hand is stacked.
It is very much stacked, yeah.
Like it's like 7 on the dot. 7 cards, full grip. I think that was a Mutable deployed because 4 mana. So we might get into like a past the turn territory. But if we do, then one player clearly has Rhinos to be deployed.
Yeah, you want to have as many Violent Outbursts here as possible to be able to do do that at instant speed. But looks like Daniel just has to
Pass back.
take the draw and go into his turn. I'm not sure if he's a 4th land drop available. He does.
So what Paulo has is like Force of Negation plus Mystical Dispute, which is pretty decent. Now we put Rhinos on the stack. Fun fact, when you play Creatures of Suspend, they gain haste. But because this doesn't cast creatures, it casts a sorcery that produces tokens, they don't have that haste ability. Which again, if it creates a Rhino creature, it would. So let's see if that Eternal Suspend is going to matter. I think we might see just double Petty Theft.
Yeah, interestingly, the Rhino is resolved, which has to feel good for Paulo, right? Because you're expecting your opponent to be sitting on some kind of a reactive hand, most likely with counters. If they're not casting anything, they have 7 cards. They kept their opening hand, so something must be up. The fact that it resolved, that would feel kind of weird for me. But yeah, double Petty Theft to deal with the Rhinos and have 2 flying threats available for the future. That ideally, have flash, which pairs up really nicely with the counter spells that you're sitting on. So Daniel in a great position here.
When playing against Rhinos, I find myself often in situations when you really want to hold up Spell Pierce, you really want to hold up Flusterstorm, and then they just go, okay, Brazen Borrower, Endurance, beat you to death. And you're like, well, what just happened?
Yeah, and this is the first big post-ban tournament, because the bans I think happened on Monday. So this is the first tournament where Rakdos Evoke is not really a thing, or at least not with Fury. Up the Beanstalk is not a thing. But I wonder if by shutting down Evoke in some way, or by banning Fury, you're just gonna make it so that the Cascade decks are just clearly better than everything else. And obviously the Cascade decks, I don't think it was meant to work this way.
Yeah.
To be able to cast these cards without mana cost at instant speed, cast my Living End or cast my Rhinos. And I wonder what is going to happen with the metagame moving forward.
Yeah, the times where you just cascade it into Ancestral Visions.
Wow, look at that.
Oh, yeah. Tishana, not Force of Negation. Tishana countering the Cascade trigger, respond Mystical Dispute.
A proper counter war. Mystical Dispute your Tishana, Mystical Dispute your Mystical Dispute.
That seems to work. Ooh, Subtlety your Tishana.
Wow.
And that it just works. Welcome to Legacy.
Wait, whose turn is it?
This is Paulo's main phase.
Did he just cast a Force of?
No, he cast Subtlety off of Force of Negation.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So to Subtlety Tishana. And this allowed this to resolve. Okay. Keep going.
If you are watching this and thinking, wow, that's so many Cascade decks at the top, how do I beat that? Then Chalice of the Void is probably your best friend.
Yes.
It's a card that goes into every deck sideboard very easily. It's an artifact. You want to play it for 0, so it fits in whatever kind of curve your deck is trying to do. And I don't think there is much better than that.
Oh, there are 2 cards left in the deck, so Daniel gets to see almost the whole library of Paulo's. There are literally 2 cards left. And so one thing I need to mention is that when you're playing against Rhinos and you have got the Chalice, unfortunately for you, Chalice won't win the match all on its own, because Rhinos has got Tishana to stifle the trigger, they've got Flame of Honor, so they can play through it, so you still have to have a proper plan of your own. Mull to 4 for a Chalice won't work, I'm telling you already. And now we see...
Yeah, we see
10 power.
10 power on the battlefield. Daniel's going to be able to untap now. And does he have a Cascade spell of his own? I see 2 lands in hand.
Force of Negation, but so yeah, doesn't seem like it. He does have got double Borrower, but it won't be fast enough to contest this board. Oh, another land is the pickup. Yeah, 5 lands in play. Pass the turn.
I think Daniel might have played an island followed by a
Oh,
forest.
islet and forest, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we will pass this on. No worries. We'll pass this on to judges. Yeah, we're passing the info on. No worries. Now we're playing Verizon Borrower. Okay. Yeah, we have caught that. The judge, it's live. So between us catching that and the judge going there, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds maybe.
Yeah, it's not really going to affect the game here all that much because the borrower can't really block the non-flying creatures anyways, and there's 10 damage coming through.
And they didn't double spell anyways.
So what Daniel is looking for is cascade cards, not to make an extra land drop where he already has 5 lands in play.
But yeah, we need to keep it clean and just double check everything. This might just result in a warning and a rewind. And the rewind is pretty simple, right? Because you just put the forest back into the hand. Everything is castable as it was. So I think it should be a pretty easy fix. Okay, yeah, the judge I think is explaining how it may have happened.
Yeah, I think this is just we're gonna back up a little bit, and if the judge wants to go through the whole process, they can just count the number of rounds, what happened. But I mean, in this situation, I think it's a pretty clear solution of yeah, there was another land that entered the battlefield. Just put it back into your hand and continue the game.
Yeah, precisely. And so now Daniel is still in a pretty bad position. He doesn't have a way to interact with these rhinos very profitably. The best answer to the opposing rhinos are his own rhinos. So that's his best top deck, of course. We don't really know what Paulo has in hand, but he does have suspended rhinos waiting as well. I'm not sure I've ever said the word rhinos as much as today.
Let's say you are playing a rhinos only tournament.
Oh my god.
You know that the tournament has 700 players playing rhinos. What is the best kind of sideboard you can have? Or, you know, how would you build your perfect 75 card rhinos deck to be as prepared for the cascade matchups as possible? Obviously, I mean, the right answer might be like, hey, I'm going to have my own chalices and then some weird transformational sideboard. But, you know, let's be a little bit real. Let's be a little bit more realistic. What's the ideal 75 card or what's the ideal 60 post board that you can have for a matchup like this? Are there some like special, you know, transformational kind of cards? Is Brazen Borrower just the best kind of like overall good against everything kind of card you can have that's really good in this matchup?
Maybe something like the One Ring, because you don't cascade into it. It fits the cost, but it also goes over the opponent, maybe.
That's true. Doesn't really get easily countered by Dispute for 1 mana.
Yeah, it does. It is countered by Tishana, so that's certainly a big problem, but a lot of cards get disrupted by Tishana anyways. But my first thought would be that maybe Planeswalker, like Jace the Mind Sculptor, bounce one of the rhinos and keep it on the battlefield, maybe something like that. Or maybe what you mentioned, like a cheesy one-time Blood Moon you and hope for the best, but then if the word spreads out, that wouldn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, also look at this game, right? Daniel has a forest and 2 islands, just naturally, you know, draws these lands. So having a Blood Moon would do nothing. There's a mountain on the other side of I think there's an island as well. So yeah, Blood Moon does not look like a good card to bring in for a mirror like that. You should just keep that in your sideboard and only bring that for matches like Amulet Titan or, you know, some of these 5-color Omnath decks.
Yeah, so probably your previous idea with White Splash and the Fairy might be the way to go.
Yeah.
But you still walk into Tishana Dispute Force. I mean, this wall of Tishana Dispute Force is just so difficult to break through. I guess creatures might be an answer. I don't know, Questing Beast.
Yeah. I think the Fairy is just the best card because it also just answers Rhinos. Like if your opponent already resolved their Cascade card, you can at least use the Fairy to bounce one of the Rhinos, draw a card. They very likely have to attack the Teferi, so you're kind of gaining 4 life as well.
Okay, I think we're back. We have wound the game. Attack for 14, for 12. And then we still do the Suspend Rhinos Pass. And we will still see Brazen Borrower end step. So it mainly happens as it should have. Nothing
Yeah, and
extraordinary there.
The situation is still the same. Daniel needs to find a card that puts creatures in play that can actually block.
Okay, yeah, this is the draw. Step Force of Negation. That's not going to cut it. Double Force lands.
Yeah, looks like he's a bit flooded and a bunch of forces, but nothing to actually
Yeah.
put into play.
That's it. That is it. So now Daniel will be on the play for the third game. Daniel, we firmly believe he's in the top 8 anyways, but being first seed is relevant because remember, in these tournaments, the higher the seed, I mean, if you're the highest seed, you're on the play, which does matter naturally. Paulo though is playing for the top 8, so Daniel is fighting for the seed. Paulo is fighting for the top 8 berth. And it seems there are some slight changes in the sideboarding, potentially. Maybe like siding the Coven back in because you're on the draw.
Yeah, I think usually that's what that's what happens on the play. The Cavern is basically a waste. It's just a land that produces colorless mana, which is typically not good enough. So the way you sometimes or usually construct these decks is that you just play the Cavern sort of in an extra land, and on the play you can just board it out.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Now, thankfully, the mana restrictions in this deck are not very harsh, so that waste is serviceable, thankfully. You don't have any like triple costs. So yeah, this is the third game, shuffling for the third game. And both games came down to the person who just cascaded more. But also interaction was in play, like Tishana played a key role in this matchup. Brazen Borrower, double petty theft. Oh, fake sideboard trick, yes. That may have been a fake sideboard trick. So, oh, I'm totally playing a cover now.
Watching this tournament, if you were building a deck for a big upcoming Modern tournament now with the recent changes, what would you have in mind? What would you be looking at? What kind of deck would you be trying right now?
That's a good question. I think I would go with Living End. Because if I play against Rhinos, my Cascade always beats theirs. So that would be one consideration. But also Murktide that has access to Spell Pierce, Fluster, but also potentially Chalice and EE. So that could be a way, but I would change the sideboard a bit. For example, I would add more disputes to combat Tishana specifically. So maybe like, with Ledger Shredder, actually, because if you actually want to beat the Rhinos specifically, then Ledger is pretty decent. So probably Murktide or Living End, I think. Oh, Mill.
I think my first thought was, let's take a look at which decks support the Fairy the best. You know, can I play this 4-color sort of Omnath shell with perhaps Sahili and Felidar Guardian? Because I do want to cast the Fairy. If I have the Fairy on turn 2 with Delighted Halfling, that is very often game over for these types of decks. So I would be looking at something with the Fairy, maybe even Blue Eye Control, although 50 minutes per round is not exactly sometimes enough for the control deck to win.
Grinding Station is a good Teferi deck. Oh, tell me about it. Yes, yes, it is. Don't make me do it. It's also a potentially EE main deck with Emery and Urza Saga. So yeah, potentially. Okay, so we see fetch pass into fetch. Probably green source suspend Rhinos yet again. Yeah, I think it's going to happen. Shortcutting a bit to make it faster. I'll find my triumph. We know the drill. Suspending also doesn't go through the stack. We just do it.
Yeah, there is actually a mill player on day 2, and I think they were actually doing pretty well too.
Do we have day 2 conversion rates? Yes, on Legacy's Twitter, you can find the day 1 metagame, day 2 metagame, and day 2 conversion rates. Everything is there. The decklists are also coming, but only after we've gone to the top 8 stage, which is in 2-ish rounds from now. And yes, suspended Rhinos pass back to the point of Blood Moon.
As it turns out, one of the best plays you can make in the mirror is just suspend Rhinos on turn 1.
And do you slam? I think this is the question that Daniel is asking himself. Do I just slam? Do I just slam? It circumvents Tishana and Hardcast dispute because it's turn 2 for Paulo.
Oh, so, yeah. You're definitely slamming a shardless agent here because your opponent doesn't have 3 mana yet for Force of Negation, for the Tishana's Tidebinder, or for Mystical Dispute. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to slam the shardless agent here.
And double checking. Okay, yeah. Shuffling, putting it back on the bottom. I think there was a Force of Negation or Tishana. That remains undecided. Okay, I think it did resolve. So 10th power on the battlefield. Lorien revealed, potentially cycled on the end step. But yeah, this is 10 power. 10 power represented. This could be a turn 2 clock, closing the game in a blazingly fast fashion. This could be just a half an hour match.
Daniel Lens cycling a Lorien reveal to get himself a breeding pool. I'm not sure if this is still at the end of Daniel's turn. If that is, then everything is fine. If it's on Paulo's turn to try to find his 3rd land, then he's in a lot of trouble because he needs to be able to challenge the Rhinos. Okay, that was the end of turn, so he untaps, has a 3rd land drop available, but now he's the one staring down 10 power worth of creatures. So now it's his turn to resolve a Cascade card.
Yep. But yeah, so Cascade resolves.
That resolves, sure. We're gonna find Rhinos. Now Daniel, since it's not his turn, he can cast a Force of Negation, or as we saw, a Commandeer possibly.
Yeah. Oh wow, that would be devastating. That would be game ending.
There is a Junt Yavmod in Melee, but it is a mislabeled deck. It is actually just Golgari. I just looked at it before this round, so it's actually just all Golgari Yavmod decks.
Oh, it's because of Fulminator Mage. That's why he was labeled, but yet effectively doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
All right, Paulo finds the Rhinos. The Crashing Footfalls. That goes on the stack. Daniel's gonna take a look at the cards. Most likely counter the number of Force of Negations. Very likely also the Cascade cards.
And one person in chat pointed something out that I actually thought about, which is whether Paulo sided out some copies of Rhinos because he always finds them in the bottom 6, right? But you want as many as you want, at least in theory. So who knows? Maybe he does have them in bottom 6. But if he is careful, he kind of knows his top 6. Or roughly knows. Because he has seen almost the entire deck. So he can gauge, for example, I've got double Fawn in the top couple, which could be crucial.
All right, Force of Negation, there it is. And we know that Paulo cannot fight back because it is his turn. He doesn't get to cast the Force for free.
Oh, yeah, that's devastating. Because Daniel, is untapping with the board position, with Dispute up, and with potentially another Cascade.
I think there's also an Otawara in his hand.
Yeah. He can play Otawara, Cascade, and hold up Dispute for the Force of Negation. but he might not decide to do it. Lorian revealed is pulled to the front.
Yeah,
It is
gets himself another island, most likely
an island.
a Stevens.
Or Stevens, yeah. With this mana, he can still cast Outbursts. But it's probably a basic. It is a basic.
It is
Okay.
actually basic, okay.
And he's at a very, very healthy 19.
And having Otawara in hand is actually huge because usually the way it goes is that each of the Rhino tokens blocks another one, which, given that they have trample, you can use the Otawara
Ooh.
after blocks to bounce one of the Rhinos and push 4 damage through. With Paulo being at 7, if he cracks into the fetch land, all of a sudden he's in a Fire Ice territory.
That's very true. That's very true. Trample, pretty tricky rules-wise, but you can take it to your advantage as the trampling creature controller. And we pass back. We just pass back. This is lethal on board. And against Otawara plus Dispute, I'm not sure whether Paulo can do anything.
Paulo stops Daniel in his upkeep to make sure he doesn't draw an extra card, which could be a counterspell, to try to play around that. So if he doesn't have a counterspell yet, he might be able to resolve the Rhinos.
Rhino was on top, which makes sense because we had gone through...
Wow.
Okay. And just, that's it.